All right. Welcome everybody to the virtual day of the 20th annual BIG conference. Our first plenary session of the day is titled Supporting Babies and Ending Child Poverty. Very, very excited to be with you all today. So grateful that you are all joining us from all corners of the world. The session is brought to you with the generous support of our sponsors, the Gerald Huff Fund for Humanity, Humanity Forward Foundation, Aid Kit, and Steady. My name is Monica Viktorova, and I will be your moderator today. So before we get to our featured panelists, who you're all very excited to see, we wanted to take this opportunity to announce the winners of this year's high school basic income essay contest. And I just want to see if I can pull our winners up on the screen. Please bear with me for a moment. Hi, Felix. Yes, you can go on camera. Please do. Thank you. So our two winners are Felix and Ahmed, and hopefully we'll be able to pull up Ahmed on stage in just a moment. So launched for the first time this year for the BIG conference. We are so pleased to be able to offer first, second, and third place cash prizes to our top essayists, two of whom have joined us this morning. So you'll see Felix on screen and hopefully Ahmed in just a second. Our third place winner is Felix Snee of Manitoba, Canada. He authored Universal Basic Income Could Change the World. Our second place winner is Sanya Patel of Tennessee in the United States, who authored The Effects of Universal Basic Income. Sanya was not able to join us today because she's participating in the summer college program this weekend. And the first place winner is Ahmed of Nevada in the US, who authored Falling Apart. All three essays have been posted to the BIG conference website and will be featured on the websites of US BIG and BICN. We really encourage you to go and read this incredible work. Congratulations to all of the winners. We've also invited Ahmed and Felix to hang out in the Kumo space immediately following the session. So please stop by to talk to them about their essays and also connect with them about basic income more broadly. And we'll just give a little bit of a virtual round of applause to the winners. Thank you so much. Maybe just a quick note and a couple of housekeeping items before we get started on how to use Crowdcast. So if you'd like to submit a question to the speakers, please post it in the Ask a Question section down below. You can also vote on questions that are already posted by other attendees. This will definitely help us determine which questions to prioritize and which questions to kind of call out. It is a really busy panel, so we want to make sure that we get as many of your questions in here as possible. Next, there is a chat box where you can hold side conversations. So this is just on the right-hand side of the screen. And this is where we will post any links and supplemental information to research or anything else relevant for the panelists today. And in order to keep things moving, we do intend to respond to any activity in the chat. So please be sure to submit your questions using the Ask a Question function. And now to our speakers. I'll keep their introductions brief so we can move to hearing from them directly. And their more detailed bios are, of course, on the conference website. So we'll start with Representative Rashida Tlaib from the US Congress House of Representatives. She is the Congresswoman for Michigan's 13th Congressional District, which includes the city of Detroit and many surrounding communities. Earlier this year, she introduced the End Child Poverty Act to create a universal child benefit that would be more generous than the child provisions in the Earned Income Tax Credit and the now expired Child Tax Credit. Holly Fogle, the Bridge Project Monarch Foundation and Nido de Esperanza, is co-founder and co-executive director of Nido de Esperanza, which means Nest of Hope in New York City, where she spends her time working with immigrant families and their young children living in poverty. She is the founder of the Monarch Foundation, which she runs with her husband, and is also the founder of the Bridge Project, New York City's first guaranteed income pilot that you'll hear more about shortly. Keira Grenier, Family Health Project. She serves as the Chief Operating Officer of the Family Health Project and has launched two separate basic income pilots, both focused on mothers with babies. and Dr. Liz Young, who will hopefully be joining us on screen shortly. I think she's just having some technical difficulties. She's a research scientist at the University of Pennsylvania Center for Guaranteed Income Research, where she uses mixed methods to evaluate the effect of guaranteed income pilots in cities across the US. So we'll begin today with some remarks from Representative Tlaib, pre-recorded expressly for this plenary session. She's provided us with the same set of questions that we'll be posing to our other panelists present. So if you just bear with me, we'll launch into the video in just a moment. Okay, sorry about that. We are trying to get the video working, so our background tech support will take that on. But in the meantime, why don't we go ahead and get started. So I would like to invite Kyra to start. She's going to be telling us about the Family Health Project, which is based in Massachusetts. So Kyra, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Monica. We feel very fortunate to be here among folks like Holly, who are doing such great work with the Bridge Project, and of course, Liz, who is studying the effects of all this work does for families. So my name's Keira Grenier. I am the COO of the Family Health Project. We are a small organization that has started in Massachusetts running 2 pilots. We were born out of the groundbreaking study Baby's First Years, wherein researchers from 6 universities held a large research study to look at the implications of direct giving to new moms. So similar to our organization, all of the mothers receiving funding are first-time moms. So we can really look at the impact of the direct giving on these families. In the first few years of the Baby's First Year study, they were able to show that there is faster brain activity associated to development and learning with the families that were receiving, at that time, a $333 a month cash transfer, unconditional use. So we were founded to continue this work and be the boots on the ground organization, doing it in a really simple way. So the idea of Family Health Project is that it's a very simple, scalable model. If you want to throw up the slide, Monica, it just shows a little bit about how our operation works. The first is that we partner with federally qualified health centers. That is where the majority of families living in poverty get their health care already. Federally qualified health centers also have a lot of support services to help families living in poverty, specifically new moms who are kind of coming into this new experience that is very overwhelming. And then to do it without enough to get by is really pretty earth-shattering. So we partner with these federally qualified health centers. They refer moms into the program. We partner with a debit card company that does not require a social security number. So we're not insuring, we're allowing participants who are not fully documented citizens to have access to our pilots. And then the moms get $400 monthly on the date of the baby's birth for the first 36 months of their child's life. Similar to Baby's First Years, in just a year over operation, we're hearing from moms the drastic changes that this is having on their families. And when we get down into the questions, we can talk a lot about that. But this is the model. It is all funded by philanthropists, individual philanthropists, and we're really excited to join this space and be among some of these other pilots that are just having drastic impacts on the families, specifically of moms. We were talking a little bit before the panel got started, and there's so many tropes associated with poverty, right? There's so many myths around why poor people are poor. And our feeling is that poor people are poor because they don't have money. And there's lots of reasons why that can be, right? Institutionalized racism, sexism, wealth transfer in this country and what that looks like. So instead of pointing to all those tropes, we've decided the way to really help people who need money is to give them money and let them have agency over what they do with that money. And study, pilot after pilot have shown when you give people money, they spend it on things that make their lives better. I think there was a stat that if the child tax credit was fully refundable, the return on investment, there would be an 8 times return on investment in terms of cutting down healthcare costs, for example, mental illness, you name it. The evidence is there to support direct giving to people who need it. So yeah, I look forward to talking to everyone about some of the ways that we're doing this.
Thank you so much, Kyra. And next, I wanted to take it over to the Bridge project that Holly Fogle will talk about. We were supposed to have a brief video presentation, but I will give our background tech support a little bit more time to make sure that we can actually launch both videos. So in the meantime, Holly, maybe you can take it away and just give a verbal explainer of the project.
Sure, Monica, happy to. And delighted to be with you all today, and certainly with Liz and Kyra. So as Kyra mentioned, in a similar vein, the Bridge Project is New York City's first guaranteed income program focused on mothers and young babies. We currently have 600 mothers enrolled in the program. 100 are 1 year in, and we have just launched our second phase with 500 additional mothers. It's similar to Kyra's program, unrestricted cash up to $1,000 a month for 3 years. And the second phase that we just launched, we have started specifically with pregnant mothers, believing how important it is in those prenatal moments to be supported as well. And I think I come at this from a philanthropist perspective. My husband and I are the sole funders at the moment of the Bridge Project, which is about $16 million. And I think we came at this from the perspective of very fundamental beliefs as philanthropists. And we have 3 of them. The first one is that we need to prevent versus undo. And for us, that means babies, not after school programs or job training programs. And I think our belief in that is really formed by the work that I have done for the last 8 years on the ground at Nido de Esperanza that Monica mentioned, which serves 110 mostly undocumented families in northern Manhattan for those first 1,000 days of life. And what we see and what all the academic evidence shows us over and over again is how important those first 1,000 days are. Bruce Perry says it's sort of like the walls of a house, right? If you don't get those foundational walls right, and they have cracks in them or they're on shaky ground, it doesn't matter what tile we put in the second floor bathroom. And so that's certainly my fundamental belief and what I see play out over and over again on the ground. The second belief that led us to this direct cash program is that the return on investment matters. Just like Kyra said, we've now proven that out as a country with the child tax credit. And fundamentally, cash is the most efficient, effective tool we have. Food stamps, which we all tout as a great program and is sort of a near cash program, is sort of 80 cents on the dollar. It's 65 cents in the black market when it's studied. So even a program like that that's pretty focused and we tout as pretty efficient is actually still not that efficient. So something like cash, where we have very high returns for our population, struck me as certainly the right tool to use. And then I think, the third piece is I was raised in the Midwest. I don't present like a New Yorker in many cases, although I've been one for 25 years now, but I deeply believe in the dignity of people. And, at the end of the day, I deeply believe in the individual, and I certainly believe in a mother's love. I will tell you a quick story that was told to us with one of our participants she said we asked them how much you have in your savings account when you join the program, and 70+% of them have less than $100. One mom said to us, I have $20. It is underneath my pillow, hidden from my partner. And we said to her, what is that $20 for? She said, well, I have a child that has asthma. And in the middle of the night, that is the cab fare that I need to get that child to the hospital in the case of an emergency. So she goes without food to make sure that $20 stays safe. So, in that perspective, my money is on the mother every time that she is going to make the right decision for her family, which is, I think, why I have so much conviction around this program.
Thank you, Holly. That's incredibly moving. So we've heard so far about 2 pilots, and I want to hand it to Dr. Liz DeYoung, who's going to tell us a little bit about what researchers are learning about the actual impact of such pilots, giving us a little bit of a window into the long-term benefits of basic income policy. And I do want to point out to participants, we have posted the link to the video about the Monarch Foundation and Bridge project in the chat. So in the event that we aren't able to get it working during our presentation today, you are definitely encouraged to check it out afterwards. Thank you. And off to Liz.
Great. Thanks so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here on this panel. I'm going to try to share my screen and a couple slides with you. I'll see if it works here. How's that? Okay, great. All right, so yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Liz DeYoung. I'm a qualitative research scientist at the Center for Guaranteed Income Research. We use mixed methods to evaluate upwards of 30 pilots across the country. And our aim is twofold. It's to identify guaranteed income's impacts on factors like health, well-being, income volatility, personal agency in order to move the needle on narrative change, and also to understand from the program side what works and what doesn't in building a body of knowledge around implementation. Our pilots vary significantly by dose, cadence, geographic context. What works, for instance, in rural South Carolina will look very different from a pilot in LA or New York City. But what they all have in common is the cash is unconditional. There's no strings attached. There's no work readiness or financial literacy programs. And we also ensure that our pilots exist alongside the benefit system, so participation does not negatively impact or preclude participants' access to benefits. One of the pilots we're evaluating is the Bridge project. This is a randomized control trial, so we have 115 mothers in control and 100 mothers that are receiving either $500 or $1,000 a month, as Holly explained earlier. And this was launched in June 2021. We conducted qualitative interviews in March 2022, so about 8 months after disbursement. So that's kind of when we tend to qualitatively start to see and hear about the impacts of guaranteed income. We conducted 22 interviews. Our protocol, our interview guide included themes like asking people about the ability to make ends meet, participants' experiences with the program, their perspectives on GI's impact on their lives and their families. For Bridge, we also added questions on prenatal medical care and experiences of new motherhood for new moms. These data have been transcribed professionally, coded, and they've undergone an initial thematic analysis. But because Bridge is a 3-year program, this really gives us the opportunity to take a deeper dive and to incorporate grounded theory in order to build out our conceptual categories in subsequent rounds of analysis. So that's all to say that, the following is very much a preliminary impression. We still have a lot of work to do, but I'm excited to share and contribute to the discussion ahead. One of our guiding research questions and interests is, do people have the power to exercise agency over their lives, which feels like a very important question given, the past 24 hours. This came through in a really clear and compelling way in speaking to mothers. That guaranteed income offers the freedom from forced vulnerability and that it gives moms the power to choose. We know that capitalism forces moms to negotiate a series of impossible decisions, competing demands, whether it be, to work or stay home, what to do about childcare, how to afford it. Guaranteed income creates a reprieve from these demands, and it gives moms space to make the choices they want and to care on their own terms. Over and over again, we spoke to mothers who were able to stay home in that critical newborn period and bond with their baby, as Holly and Kyra were talking about. Nicole, who's quoted here before the bridge was telling us, she's scrambling to get a job at the end of her pregnancy, hoping that she could just get a little time off and then, she'd have to go back to work as soon as possible. And she wanted to spend that time with her baby, but financially couldn't. And with the guaranteed income, she's able to make that choice. Another mom related that before the program, she had to bring her child to work with her because she couldn't forego the extra shift and she couldn't afford childcare. And again, guaranteed income allows her to make that decision now. So, it seems to provide this ability for moms to move from ability to agency and creating the kind of life and the family relationships that they want. It's also worth mentioning the context of scarcity and inflation that these mothers are navigating. I'm happy to talk further in the discussion, but in the interviews, it seemed that this context really underscored the importance of extending GI to the individual, the mother, rather than the household. We saw, as Holly just mentioned, moms are constantly making microfinance decisions. They are constantly managing scarcity and hyper aware of inflation's effects on what's best for them and their families. And that certainly came through in interviews. Guaranteed income is a tool for them to leverage and kind of fill the gaps however they see fit in their personal budget. So the cash is filling in the gaps, but it can't fill all of them. Guaranteed income can only go so far. And although, our initial impressions show moms as exercising personal agency to some extent now in their decision-making around parenting and finances, there are structural impediments that remain. And, as it did for other systemic inequities, for instance, the pandemic spotlighted the structural vulnerability that has always existed for low-income families. We heard experiences of motherhood were indelibly shaped by the pandemic. We heard about the cost of living and, particularly in New York City, the increasing inability to afford rent, where housing need is really stark. And guaranteed income might help someone avoid eviction, but it is certainly not a panacea for the housing need that we still face. Finally, we can't talk about cash and moms without talking about unpaid care work and the lack of supportive policies for families with kids. Moving forward, I think this work, it's very nascent, but it has important implications, which we plan to further explore through engaging in multiple levels of thematic analysis, grounded theory work, and integrating it eventually with the quantitative side of the center. There's plenty of further research pathways down the line to explore. So we plan to work with the quant team to produce a mixed methods analysis of the impact of guaranteed income. And that's, further down the line. We've launched a new initiative for research called Time to Care. And the Bridge Project Phase 2 is actually the first cohort of this project. We're rolling it out in a couple different pilot sites. And this works specifically with moms and caregivers around unpaid care work and time use. And our hypothesis is perhaps that the infusion of guaranteed income can, allow moms more personal agency, more control over their time, more financial independence. And we're looking at this through the lens of time and unpaid care work. Finally, programmatic considerations, we'll be looking at what works and what doesn't as part of the move to create and broaden this knowledge base for effective unconditional cash transfers on a wide scale. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm excited for the discussion.
Thank you so much, Liz. And thank you to all the panelists so far. We've heard some really incredible work that's happening around the US, 3 pilots that are going on that I've clearly already demonstrated what many pilots before them have shown, which is that guaranteed income is crucial to supporting children, to supporting mothers and caregivers in general. And so perhaps we'll jump into a couple of questions. And Liz, you already sort of alluded to this, but of course, in the last 24 hours, women and people who can become pregnant in the United States have lost the constitutionally protected right to a safe abortion. And this, of course, will impact, so many people who may become pregnant all over the US. And I'm sure will also shake out in these pilots and may affect the people in these pilots. So maybe keeping that sort of background in mind, would really like to kind of hear your thoughts. What are the sort of major arguments that targeting unconditional basic income specifically for children and specifically for mothers is crucially the way to go? I'll open it up to anybody, but I can also go clockwise on the screen if that's easier. Perhaps
Yeah, I think that Holly had a really good starting point about this, which is just the trust of a mother. Think about really the most vulnerable among us, they're babies. They depend on their mother for absolutely everything. And if we think about, like you said, Monica, now that the government has determined that you no longer have the right to choose whether or not you are going to be a mother, it's crucial that then we find ways to support these families who are moms in poverty. I think that if we look at babies' first years, yeah, for sure, the ways that we see development in children whose families are receiving direct cash sets them up for future success. I think, there's the stat that a child graduating high school with $500 of cash in a savings account is more likely to go to college and complete college. So there's so many different ways that we can set kids up for success. The playing field is very unequal, right? Direct giving to moms and babies when these children are in the first 1,000 days, the most critical time for brain development, helps level the playing field a bit. It gets towards some of the wealth gap. I think there's obviously two ways that we can discern why this is true. First of all, with more income, of course, these mothers are able to afford things like quality childcare, books for their kids, keeping their house safer for the babies in their lives. And then there's also the unseeable, the less tangible, the stress that mothers face in poverty, which as a mother of two young children not living in poverty, it's stressful. So the fact that we're expecting mothers to survive on what the current benefit system looks like is not sustainable. Similar to what Liz was saying, the Family Health Project does work in tandem with the current benefits that families receive. We think that that's crucial, and we think that okay, thanks. One of those little children is popping in to let me know he's eating charcuterie, which he's able to do because we can afford it. But for those families that can't, the youngest and most vulnerable among us, while they're learning and growing to be people, deserve to have the same support system that families who can afford it have. I'll pass it off to someone else to supplement that.
No, I would just add on to that, Kyra. I completely agree. And I think we've now in our second phase that we're just rolling out have backed it up to pregnant mothers as our intake. And we had the applications open for a very specific set of 20 zip codes in Northern Manhattan and the Bronx for only 10 days. And we had over 4,000 completed applications for what were 500 spots, which just shows you the need, how much people are hurting, how fragile these people are, and how much they just need some additional support and opportunity. And I think for us, we've backed it up to the pregnant piece because we also now know that if we can get to a normal birth weight, right, that has effects on neonatal mortality, that has effects on long-term earnings, it has effects on long-term health. I think we're just going to keep learning over and over how incredibly important these first 1,000 days are. And people will say things to me like, well, are you measuring bedtime routines? And I thought bedtime, if we can get to a bedtime routine, that is like gold, right? I mean, that's a luxury. But how many things have to go right in a day to get to a bedtime routine, right? I mean, that has to mean that we've had food, that we are calmed down, that I have time as a mother to be able to snuggle with someone, And so, yes, like a bedtime routine is a fantastic thing, but that's a really privileged statement to say, like, oh, are you measuring bedtime routines? Like we're actually measuring safety and food security and housing stability and things like that, that ultimately hopefully do lead to more bedtime routines for sure. Because they are really important, right? And books are really important. But I think I think we forget how many of our peer mothers are working at the bottom of Maslow's pyramid of just trying to get through lunch, and what that means, and all the obstacles that are in her way to do that. So I think, I can't imagine a better group of people to invest in, frankly, and a more important one, particularly when the country right now, again and again, is telling women they don't matter very much.
Yeah, I would just echo the importance of the early days too, and just being able to make that choice. Like one mother I remember saying she was thinking that she might go back to work, but she was like, I'm just not ready. And she said, it matters so much for their future, the bond that we create now. And another mother saying, that her own mother had to work 3 jobs to get by. And she felt like, I want to break the cycle of that. And I want to be more involved in my child's life and have that opportunity because I can. So investing in babies by investing in mothers, is just seems like a no-brainer.
I think also if we think about young children, and this is playing off of what both of you said, the way that children grow to be successful is by accepting love from parents, feeling confident, knowing that they have support. And when your mom is working 3 jobs and isn't able to spend that time with you, because if she doesn't work those 3 jobs, there's not food, like something that's an absolute necessity, you're not getting that, right? So when these moms are having the extra cash to be able to say, I'm not going to work 3 jobs, I'm going to get to know my kid and make sure that my kid is getting the love and the support and the extra snuggles and reading, that makes a huge difference in the entire trajectory of that child's life.
Yeah, I can agree with you more, Kyra.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the comments in the chat around, I think, our collective positive outlook here. And I have to say, I can get really frustrated with our world. I think we all can at the moment. But there is, I think what I have so much, and I don't like the word hope, because hope means like we're just going to cross our fingers and like blow and hope something happens, right? But I think there is so much possibility here. And it's backed by data, which is what's amazing, right? And we're talking about people's lives. And I think if, there's so much work around guaranteed income and basic income for so many populations, and how positive it is. And I think when we're going to get a sort of quadrupling of our effect, because it's not just the mom, but a baby and the other children that are in households with this. And so I have so much of a positive outlook, I think, of where we can take this. And, just my hometown of New York City, people said to us, you're crazy to you can't do a pilot in New York City. Nobody does pilots in New York City. It's too complicated. It's too complex. And I thought, but this is my home. So we have to figure this out. And, there's 25,000 babies roughly born in New York City every year into poverty. So I have 600 of them right now, and we're not going to stop till we get to 25,000. And so it's possible, right? If we take it sort of baby by baby, piece of the country by piece of the country, we can do this. We need to do this.
Definitely echoing that. Oh, I see. Sorry, Kyra, you are speaking, but you are on mute.
Oh, that's always so bad. I was going to say my favorite thing that I fall back on time and time again, which is why I think this work is very important, is my mom, who passed away about 8 years ago, saying to me, you don't have to help everyone. You have to help some people. And that's kind of the approach that we've taken. We can't help every single person because there is a world of hurt out there, like Holly said, but we are helping the people that we can. And the difference that is making in the lives of, like you said, Holly, not just that baby or that mom, but the entire family, and then the community of families who are benefiting from it is really significant.
Yeah. Maybe on that note of, trying to help as many people as possible, are there some specific challenges, structural or otherwise, that face mothers trying to access basic income pilots? Do they have anything specific that they go through that any of you have noticed as you've worked on these pilots that are just specific challenges for them?
I think for me, this makes me think about the idea of targeting guaranteed income to individuals rather than households. Targeting GI just to moms rather than households. We have to think about, the power dynamics and the gender imbalances, where if we target to households, mothers can't necessarily use the money to create alternative pathways because they're bound up by different dynamics, different obligations, perhaps to extended household networks. We see with some of the population in the Bridge project, there's undocumented members of family that they need to support. And so filtering it all through a household lens, you don't get that individual agency. And that also pertains, I think someone mentioned earlier, this idea of leaving abusive relationships or so targeting guaranteed income just to the mother, I think, mitigates some of the complexities that they might face in participating in basic income because they can leverage money in the ways that they know best rather than having to contend with others in the household.
Any other thoughts before I move to the next question?
No, I would just say I think we have to what we measure is very important when we're dealing with mothers and infants, and a little different than some of the other guaranteed income pilots that are going on around the country. So, we tend to think, oh, if people have gone back to work, like what we were able to prove in Stockton, that's a fantastic thing. Of course, that is a fantastic thing applied to a general population. But I think, what we're also thinking about with our mothers is what Kyra was saying. It might be actually better if they were able to stay home, because we know during that first period of time how critical that development is. And we also know that if you can find equivalent care outside the home, it's fine, but often it's not equivalent care outside the home. And that the best care is really the care of the mother or the father in those first days. And so I think part of what the dialogue, Liz and her team and my team has been having is how do we really measure and how do we tell those narratives as well, that perhaps the mother's able to stay home or not work the second job or not work the third job during those really earliest days is a huge success for our country longer term. And not just saying, oh, it's fantastic that she's re-entered the workforce, 2 months after birth or 2 weeks after birth. So I think we need to be thoughtful about what we're measuring and how we collectively tell these narratives as they emerge.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even when it comes down to, people are often interested in spending data. And of course, these moms are spending the money perhaps on formula or diapers, and that's fine. But we're also interested in how does that allow the mom then to maybe breathe and, take a weight or take some weight off of her shoulders. What does that mean for the mental health impacts of GI, rather than just looking at, these outcomes like spending data or employment outcomes? Looking at the broader context of that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I think Liz really hit the nail on the head there. The stress element, the weight of the mother. I mean, there's so much on the shoulders of a mom now when that mother is living in poverty and having to constantly be thinking about making sure that the child is safe, cared for, then the power dynamics, relation dynamics. A lot of these mothers in our pilot are not documented citizens, so there's constant threat for them. Being able to make sure that moms are getting the resources to not only to have the cash to alleviate some of the burdens of that stress, but also the resources to kind of unpack those and make sure that they are getting what they need is a little bit more unique from other populations when you're talking about GI pilots, because there's just so much, right, that you can't quantify as a mom to a new baby. So
I think the other thing that makes me think of that we're excited about, again, very early impressions, just kind of starting this research, but not only thinking about, the mom's ability to care for her baby and her family, but also her ability to care for herself. And, taking, even if it's a couple minutes in the day, taking time for herself, does guaranteed income allow a mother to have that space to actually just take a little time for her? That's something that we're really interested in. And hopefully with our new kind of research perspective that we're launching, we'll get to some insight into how that might work in practice. But
Yeah, one of the anecdotes we have from one of the families in our pilot is that the money was used monthly. Part of the money was used for the husband, the father of the baby, to buy a T pass. In Boston, we use the T, and be able to access employment elsewhere that was providing much more for their family, something he wasn't able to do because of transportation limitations in the past. And so that then freed up that mom to get some of that time for herself, because her husband was bringing in more income in addition to the direct gift that they were getting monthly. So you can see it play out in lots of ways.
Yeah, it feels like this very kind of, it feels privileged to say like self-care. Everyone deserves self-care and everybody needs time for themselves, and so that I think is another reason why it's really important to work with this population as well.
Definitely. So I just wanted to let the audience know, I do see that we've already posted it in the chat. So we are able to have the video from Representative Tlaib work. And so we will, at the top of the hour, move to that. So perhaps before that, maybe just a couple of final questions. The first is maybe to follow up on some of the discussions that we've already kind of been having, but to what extent are the mothers who are involved in these pilots, cognizant of some of the legislative efforts, for example, like Representative Tlaib's End Child Poverty Bill, or even some of the other pilots that are going on? To what extent are they perhaps aware of the activism or wanting to participate in some of the activism around basic income that is going on?
I would say for us that we don't expect the moms to be the experts or the advocates for guaranteed income. We see that as our job, not theirs. I think, I spent a lot of time with mothers like this, with our work with Neither Diasporans. And I think, fundamentally, they are just trying to get through their day, to find formula for the baby right now, which is another fiasco, to not lose a rented room from a landlord that's a bit shady, to keep their cell phone on so they can call their mom somewhere else. And so I think our moms have been really willing to share their stories with reporters and with other news agencies when we've asked them. But I feel like that's a tough burden to put on them at this point in time. But I do think it's a really important burden that all of us need to take on and continue to figure out how we highlight their stories with a lot of dignity and in their voices.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I think that's one of the challenges for Family Health Project is making sure that the voice of the moms are out there without any kind of coercion, right? Because this is an unconditional gift. We don't want these moms to feel like we are adding anything else to their plate. There's already such a huge mistrust of traditional financial institutions, government, who has really just let these moms fall through the cracks, that we don't want them to feel like they have to do anything else. And like Holly said, I don't know that they necessarily have the capacity to. So I'm not sure what the benefit would be there. I think it's our job to determine how to tell their stories in their voices. And there's a lot of, growing talk about the narrative, about how we share this, how we let moms have the agency to share their own stories, right? Because we don't want to, we don't want to take their voices. But that is a challenge, especially for an organization like ours that is funded by philanthropists. A little different than Holly's is that we are at the point where in order to expand, we're going to need to be doing some fundraising. And so bringing donors in, from a traditional development standpoint, you want to share the stories, right? But this is a harder way to share the stories and let the moms have the dignity that they deserve. And that goes also back to Holly, like every person deserves the dignity. Like, how would you feel if you had to get up there and talk about something that was really hard and challenging for you, and you had to share with people that, you can't always find formula for your baby, and you have to take 3 buses to get to 3 jobs? I mean, that's a lot to put on moms. So I really echo what Holly says.
I would just add, in terms of take up, I think in, many of our pilots, and we saw this and we experienced this in Stockton, is, as Kyra said, there is a legacy of predatory financial institutions in many of these communities, and people don't trust these programs at first necessarily. They're like, is this a scam? It's too good to be true. But, partnering, I think, partnering with a nonprofit like the Bridge Project kind of breaks some of that down, where for groups like undocumented folks or, people tend to trust a little bit more because it's not a federal government program necessarily. I think too, people do their own research. We've heard people hear about this program and then they're like, looking at all the different pilots that occurred. And so, people are seeing that this is a mode of discussion and the public narrative is changing. But there is that mistrust, maybe quite rightly so, based on that history and legacy.
Yeah, we're seeing because we partner with federally qualified health centers, we're seeing and hearing of moms who are changing their care providers to other health centers because they've heard of the pilot and want to be involved in the pilot, which is in many ways great, but also it's, that we've said it a lot of times, the need is out there, it is everywhere. So, yeah.
So definitely, a call to action for us to make sure as advocates that we are doing the hard work of making sure we're uplifting these moms and doing all we can to make sure that basic income succeeds. So I wanted to move to a question from the audience. This one is from Diane. Diane says, highly alarming practice of states keeping large portions of their TANF grants unspent, despite unmet need continues unchecked. I'm a strong advocate for leveraging successive cash transfer pilots to make sure states pay their unspent TANF block grants out as cash to individuals. Ohio, for example, is sitting on $700 million. Have the panelists thought about this situation with TANF?
I haven't
I'm not sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyra.
I know I just wasn't sure if you were still on. You go for it.
No, I was just going to say, we haven't thought about that specifically, but, with my work at NIDO, what we did see, New York State, as you all know, had passed an excluded workers fund. And, that was really meant for all the folks who had been left out of all the federal safety net programs during the pandemic to access funds. And it was pretty famous both in New York and New Jersey that most of those funds went unused. Because they made it unbelievably hard for people who didn't have documentation to then provide huge amounts of documentation, not huge, but huge in the eyes of those people, right? So, I think this is where, we get a lot of questions around how do we know people aren't going to waste this money? Well, first, we have obviously lots of data from all kinds of guaranteed income pilots run around the world now for a long time that show people don't waste this money. But I would also say, I think they put our pilots at such a high bar relative to all other federal programs or, other programs. So exactly as you're saying there with TANF, there's a huge amount of money that gets wasted or not spent as it's supposed to get spent. And that's one of the better programs out there in the scheme of these programs. So I'm all for trying to do things very differently with a lot more dignity back in the hands of individuals. I'm not a bureaucracy person at all, as you all probably sense. So I'm happy to blow it all up if we could, right? And just get it into the hands of people who need it the most.
Thank you. And maybe one final question, and I wanted to direct this one towards Liz, but of course open to all of you. One of the things that we talked about last year at this conference, there was a panel specifically around the feminist case around caregiving labor and how so often, care for children and care for families and care for elders, relational care is really sort of relegated to women. And Liz, I thought it was quite interesting that you had sort of found that despite the fact that,
I'm here to share the Tlaib. I'm going to go off the video. Yeah.
I hear a little bit. Is that me or? I might just, there we go. Awesome. So I guess just to follow that up, what you're kind of seeing is that you are enabling these moms to have, more peace of mind, but the cash transfers aren't actually making, their partnerships perhaps more egalitarian. They are still performing the majority of this caring labor. So I thought I would get maybe your thoughts on where you kind of see the work going if you guys are probing around some of these questions.
I think that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because, we talk about go at employment and the labor force, but like unpaid care work is work, and it is some of the hardest work on earth, and it's what keeps everything going. And something we've been interested in is just the fact that I think the pandemic shone a light a little bit on the fact that particularly mothers, but primary caregivers are juggling so many things all at once. And when we were all in lockdown, we kind of saw that on screen, that people are doing a million things and wearing a million hats, and it's not talked about. It's underappreciated work. And so, with the Time to Care initiative and with some other pieces that we're working on, we definitely want to bring this more into the forefront and talk about the fact that unpaid labor is so critical to our society, but it is often so underappreciated. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Absolutely. Any thoughts, Holly or Kyra, before we jump into the video from Representative Tlaib?
I think Liz's point totally underscores the reason of why we focus on moms and babies and finding those moms. Similar to Holly, we start getting those moms while they're pregnant, so that as they are potentially going into that unpaid labor force, we can help them to navigate that. But yeah, definitely like bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah, and I think we have a moment here, right, as a country, as women. And so I think the waters are troubled. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to figure out how we wade out of this, but with hope and with dignity and with the art of possibility in front of us, because it's certainly there. So I'm a seize the moment kind of person, and I'm feeling energized around what is in front of us in spite of what has happened.
Absolutely. So on that note, Stacey, I'll hand it over to you, and we will now hear the remarks pre-recorded from Representative Rashida Tlaib. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Thank you so much for having me today at the Income Movement's 20th Annual Basic Income Guarantee Conference. Really big mouthful. I am so grateful for the work that you all are doing on behalf of advancing direct cash assistance to every family in America and hosting today's keynote panel on moms and babies. As you all witnessed this past year, when we had provided direct cash assistance to our families, our moms, babies, the results were transformative. With the passage of the American Rescue Plan and the expanded child tax credit, 61 million children, nearly, I think across the country, it was like 36 million households received monthly payments, received direct assistance. By expanding the child tax credit and making it fully refundable, families across our country receive $250 to $300 per child. And simply put, it's the closest thing that we ever got to universal child benefit. We reached the most vulnerable communities and created a blueprint for future cash assistance to our families. This is a foundation that we must build on. I know the momentum in Congress is slipping away with inaction. So this is why we have to continue advocating and being much louder than we are in regards to this very important initiative and advocacy. Yes, in Congress and the House side, we passed the Build Back Better Act, which would have included an extension of the expanded child tax credit. However, as you all know, this obstruction of a single Democratic senator and a unified Republican opposition, the bill did not receive action, and the child tax credit expansion was allowed to expire. All of our progress in fighting child poverty is at risk of becoming undone. As you all know, the Center on Poverty and Social Policy at Columbia University found that child poverty rate rose from 12% in December 2021 to 17% in January 2022. That's an increase of 41%, or an additional 3.7 million children now in poverty. The fight is too important, too urgent for our families for us to back down. And so that's why I introduced the End Child Poverty Act to create a fully universal child benefit in America. As we all know, in the absence of the expanded child tax credit, we had to move forward and be much more bolder. So I was interested in creating a proposal based on a simple premise: no child should ever enter poverty because their family added another child. This benefit would be straightforward: a payment of $393 per month per child. That number is the difference between one person poverty line to two person poverty line. As we saw with the CTC, monthly payments would help families incorporate the benefit into their budgets rather than waiting for an annual lump sum in the end of the year. The benefit would be paid out of the Social Security Administration, and they currently send out monthly payments right now to 50 million seniors and has administrative capacity to send out checks to our parents at the nation's, I think it's about 77 million children, to be able to access it very effectively and efficiently. Children would be, and this is my favorite part, would be automatically enrolled at birth when they receive a Social Security number to avoid unnecessary paperwork. Unfortunately, many of our existing social safety nets are leaving too many of our nation's children behind. That's why we're trying to address it with the End Child Poverty Act. The United States' two main child benefit programs, you all know the child tax credit, but also the earned income tax credit, are currently structured in a way that does largely exclude most of our most vulnerable neighbors. It excludes the poorest of 9% of our children entirely are excluded, and partially excludes the next poorest 13%. In addition, non-universal programs are usually accompanied by, red tape, different obstacles, complicated paperwork, and confusion in eligibility requirements, but not with this bill. This program would be universal, and it would include no income phase-ins or phase-outs. Children will be automatically enrolled at birth. And did I mention how much I love that part? And every family would receive a monthly payment for every child they are currently caring for between the ages of 0 and 18. And with the monthly payment pegged at the difference between the 1 and 2 person poverty line, the payments would self-adjust each year without any additional action needed by the Social Security Administration or Congress to account for the cost of living adjustments and inflation. Estimates provided by the People's Policy Project show that this change would cut child poverty by 64% and cut deep child poverty by 70%. By our government providing monthly checks to all of our children, the Universal Child Benefit under the End Child Poverty Act would benefit all families, not just the poorest among us. With the Universal Cash Benefit, we truly can end child poverty in America, the richest country in the world. As we continue building a movement towards a universal basic income and creating permanent universal child benefit, we know that policymakers will be asking, why now? We know that many, including some of my colleagues, will point to the rising inflation, what's going on with inflation as an excuse not to act. But if you've taken a trip to the grocery store lately, you've seen the prices of everyday necessities go up. With the unchecked consolidation and price gouging, big corporations are squeezing every penny they can out of our communities. And these skyrocketing prices fall hardest on our families, particularly families with small children. Meanwhile, the cost of living has continued to increase year after year. Most of our workers aren't seeing the wages increase. There has not been any gains there. Families are slipping further and further behind. We have a unique opportunity in our country, not only to halt this trend, but to reverse it. From housing to fuel, to diapers, to infant formula, our nation's families need a safety net. And the most immediate, direct way is to provide it in direct cash assistance. Last year, when families received their monthly child tax credit, they spent it on necessities like food, utilities, clothing, housing, and other essential bills. As a result, hunger among families with children dropped by 24% due to the child tax credit. So a robust child benefit doesn't just put cash directly in the hands of our families that need it the most, but it also reduces the strain on our nation's already overburdened social safety nets programs like TANF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, and of course, SNAP. Not to mention the countless nonprofits out there, community organizations who have stepped in to help our neighbors during the pandemic when they need it the most. We know that we don't have to accept the status quo, and that the American Rescue Plan's CTC expansion proves it. It showed us what can be possible. If the Senate is serious about tackling the effects of price gouging on American families, then they absolutely must consider the universal child benefit, but also hold the corporations accountable at the same time. Without it, families will be hit even harder by price hikes and sharply curtail their consumer spending. The families on the brink right now will backslide right into poverty. All of that is a recipe for a recession. Just as basic incomes help families smooth out the various speed bumps in their monthly budgets, like a flat tire or an unexpected emergency visit, a universal child benefit program will help our economy weather the storm of inflation and the unbelievable price gouging that's currently happening, particularly as improvements to our supply chain infrastructure take time to be implemented. In fact, we saw last year that there is even some appetite on the Republican side of the aisle for a child benefit for families. I was pleased that Senator Romney reintroduced the bill this month with 2 additional Republican co-sponsors in the Senate. Unfortunately, though, to get his 2 other colleagues on board, his new proposal makes the poorest families not eligible for the program, and the poorest children will receive no benefit of it at all. So not only does this proposal lack compassion and empathy for our neighbors most in need, it runs counter to the very premise of universal child benefit. It won't increase employment, it won't reduce poverty, and by including complicated income phase outs, it won't even be easier to administer than what we have now, the status quo. That simply isn't acceptable. So we need to continue to building on the progress we have already made in establishing the child tax credit expansion, not taking a big step backwards with some of these proposals. Now is the time to be bold, my friends. We know that if we do not act, millions of families would again fall more deeper into poverty. Now more than ever, cash assistance, direct benefits would provide critical lifelines for our families struggling to make ends meet. And if there is any combination of 50 senators, Republican or Democrats, that are interested in advancing an agenda that places families and children first, then we simply cannot allow this opportunity to slip away from us. We must continue raising our voice, reminding those who represent us that the fight against child poverty is not a temporary one-year priority. It is child poverty existed before COVID, as you all know. And if we do nothing following the CTC expansion's expiration, it will continue to exist after the pandemic is long over. This is a fight that we have to commit to with permanent universal programs. No more one time. I know I'm tired of it. And I know many of the advocates out there are too. Again, I am so grateful for all the work that you all are doing on behalf of the income movement. We've come so far, y'all, and this is no longer an abstract economic theory or some sort of hypothetical policy. This is something that has had tangible, immediate effect and touched millions of children's lives. So we've done it before, we can do it again, and it's going to take all of you organizing in the community. I know we didn't get the Civil Rights Act or the right to organize in the workplace because of who was in Congress or who was president of the United States. It's because people in the community organized, they marched, they boycotted to get it done. And so we got to continue doing that and understanding that People Power Center movement, telling the stories, talking about what the impact of CTC had and how we have to build on that and be even more bolder is what is critically important right now. Thank you all so much. Again, thank you all so much for having me. And please know that you have a partner and a fighter in the United States Congress and me. I will always be here and my door will always be open. Ending child poverty in the most wealthiest country in the world should be at top of every single member of Congress's agenda. And so just know for me, it's something that I will not take off the table. Thank you again so much.
Incredible remarks from Representative Tlaib. We're so lucky and grateful to have had her remarks recorded offline. And of course, we're so grateful to all of the panelists today who have joined us virtually and in person. Kyra, Liz, and Holly, thank you for sharing your work with us. Thank you for talking about the important strides you are all making to help mothers and help children and end child poverty. And hopefully it's given our audience a little bit of a sense of both the policy positions that are possible, as well as the real tangible work that people are doing on the ground to help moms and kids right now to end child poverty through basic income. So before we close, again, want to thank our panelists and also want to thank our audience. You're all joining from every corner of the world. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. A couple of just housekeeping notes before we close. So a recording of this session will be available after the broadcast ends, and it will just be at the same link that you used to come to the session initially. So you can always come back to it and refer to it. If you would like to continue the conversation, we really encourage you to head over to the Kumo space. You can meet our high school essay winners, you can meet other panelists as well, and you can meet each other and hopefully organize together. And at the conclusion of the conference, we will also be sending out a post-conference survey to all attendees. It does help us, really, truly, your feedback does help us. It helped last year when you filled it out. So please, we do encourage you to fill it out. And once again, thank you to everyone here. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience. And please continue supporting basic income in any way we can. And hopefully together we can make it a reality for everybody across the nation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Monica.
Thanks so much.